Okay, so here we are underneath the car. This is the handbrake module, and what you can see is there's two cables coming out. This is actually the left-hand side of the car. This is the emergency release cable, which is going to go into the boot, and this is what they call a Bowden cable, which is the one that goes to the actual drum on the wheel of the left-hand side of the car. And then here you've got the other Bowden cable, and you've got, this is the sort of electronics, so the electrical feed provides a signal into it. So if you're taking it off, as you can see, these bolts are actually undone, but there's 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3, which bolt this little sort of shelf onto the chassis, and I think there's a 13mm bolt, and then there's 3 here that bolt the module onto the shelf. I've undone it. I'll just show you. I'll pull this off. There's not much you can see on the module itself when it's in the car, but if you want to fix it, you've got to take it off and take it apart. Now, taking it off is a bit tricky, and the problem is, well, there's a few problems. So firstly, it's bloody fiddly to get to. Okay, I'll get this off. Right. So now we're looking sideways now, so you can see this thing. It's just sort of hanging off here. Right. So the first problem is this emergency release cable. You've got to unhook it in the boot. There's a little white clip you can undo, and then you can just pull the cable through. But you need to undo this bolt. Where is it? This one here. On the back here by this mud guard. There's actually one here which I've not got. But you pull this bolt off, slide this thing kind of pulls back, and you can reach in. There's a couple of places in there where it's clipped, and you pull it out, and it comes out, and that's what it looks like. Okay, so that's not too bad. Now, the Bowden cables are, in theory, very easy. You can unscrew both of these things, and on this right-hand side, you'll have a black square plate that's attached to a very long left-hand thread. So you unscrew this, and you want to see that black plate. You turn it clockwise a lot. And on the left hand side there's a sort of white plastic clip that you can undo, which is pretty easy. This thing's a piece of cake as well. You just pop this and fold it, and it kind of comes out. The difficulty is if you've had to release your handbrake because the handbrake motor's stuck. So what happened to me was the force sensor broke, which means that the handbrake was stuck on and it was jammed in. So this clockwise thread, the left-hand thread I was talking about, got jammed completely into the shaft inside here, which means that this black thing that you would normally, you unscrew this and you access it, a black square head of basically a head of a nut. You can unscrew it. That was not possible for me. It was completely jammed, so I had to undo it all the way, and that's where it got difficult, because you've got to take the wheel off, you've got to take the knuckle off and the brake disc off over here, and then open up the little holder for the cable, and then pull this black Bowden cable all the way through, which it's only clipped in one place, which is up here somewhere. Is it? I can't see it now, but it's clipped to the chassis. Oh yeah, okay. You can see this kind of star. Here's the drive shaft, and then see that little star, that hole with the sort of star shape. It's just clipped just above there. You can't see it very easily. There we are. You can see the cable going through it, and there's it's got a sort of rubber sleeve, a little kind of collar that locks into this hole here. So that's how that works. So when you've taken the wheel off, the knuckle off, so this is a whole brake caliper and the knuckle, so not the 7mm Allen key, but the E18 bolt that goes into here. You're then looking at a brake drum. So this brake's actually got a disc and a drum. And the drum is, that friction surface there is used by the handbrake only. So now that you've got the disc off, you can see this mechanism here. And that is the mechanism which operates the handbrake. There's a little spring here. And what I've got to do is lift that spring up. It's hooked over that into that little hole there. Got to lift it up, gently take it out, and then this part will open up. And we can look at the actual cable head. The head of the cable that is the handbrake cable, basically. Okay, so I've just popped that spring off. It has actually fallen off. It's going to have to be put on at the other end as well. So I'm just going to put that carefully somewhere aside, and then we can. Now these shoes are no longer being pulled together by a spring. So if I lever it up gently, I should be able to, like that. Okay, so now that I've levered that up just a little bit, this mechanism is no longer under any force, so that should just gently pop out. Let's have a look. It's got a kind of lip on it. There we are. Okay, you see that? It's coming out there now. And what happens is, it's almost this. Okay, there's a spring on the other side, which is annoying me. Okay, right, here we go. So this comes out like this, and it looks like a pretty closed thing, but it basically just opens up somehow, there, like that. You know, you see this just sort of falls down, and there, those little two hooks, and you can see the hole behind it. That is where the handbrake cable comes out, basically through the whole sort of knuckle of the suspension. It kind of goes in the back there. There's a hole in the back. Comes out here, and then it just sits in there. So I'm going to put it back in. So obviously it looks like that. There's the end of the cable. I'm going to put that back through the hole and hook it back on here. Right, so this is the handbrake module from the X5. These are T20 torque screws. They're a bit rusty, but they all come out fine. As you can see, this side, I had to take it off. With this side, I was able to leave the cable in the car, but this side I wasn't, which means I had to undo it all the way. To get this off, you have to take the wheel off the car and the brake disc off, which involves taking the knuckle off, so it's quite complicated. So ideally, you take these cables off here at this end, you unscrew this, and you just unhook it. And what happened to me was that this one here, here's what you normally do. You pull this out, wiggle that, it'll come out, that pops out, and you see there's a left-hand thread here. So normally, you're lying underneath the car, you can just unscrew this. You unscrew it clockwise and it just comes out. Eventually, it's a long thread, but eventually it'll just come out. Okay? In my case, this one was not budging an inch, because in fact it turns out it was completely jammed, and that's why I had to take this whole thing. This is the emergency release cable, which comes out into the boot. Pretty straightforward to remove. So let's open it up. Right. So the way this works is, there's one, as you can see from this cable here, this is a square cross-section thing which fits into basically a square cylinder, as it were, here. And the motor turns through this gearbox, which rotates this splined shaft and pulls that end inwards and this end that way at the same time. In other words, that screw goes inside this shaft, and by turning the shaft via the motor, you can screw it in or out. So the way it works is, when the brakes are off, it's in more or less this position. In other words, that this bit here and that bit there are right at the end, and the thread is completely extended. When you turn the motor, you screw the thread in. That pulls both ends in towards the middle. So in other words, you're tensioning both the cables, and the tension is taken through the shaft, not through the motor, of course. But there's a very clever device here. This is a force meter. So basically, it keeps tensioning until the force meter says, right, that's enough tension. So there'll be a specific amount of tension. And in my case, what we think has happened is that this is broken. In other words, it didn't stop the motor. The symptoms were we put the brake on, there was this horrible grinding noise and it wouldn't go off. So that grinding noise was the sound of this motor winding this thread all the way in until that black head, which you can just about see sticking out the end here, was jammed right into the end of that shaft and wouldn't come out. And even after I'd got it off the car, it took a big spanner to undo that. So I've now replaced the force meter, but it's also an opportunity to show you how the very ingenious emergency release mechanism works, which you can't really see here, but I'll show you. If I pull this cable, eventually, it actually pops out. There you can see here, there's a pulley at the end, and there's a little ball, and that ball catches on a couple of little claws that this black thing attached to, and it will actually just pop the thing off. So if your scenario is that your brake's jammed on, or something like this, pull this hard enough, eventually it'll pop it off. Okay, caused quite a lot of tension, but anyway, it does work. because that's how I got the brakes off. So I've just replaced this. Now, when I opened it, that thing was separate from that thing because I'd operated the emergency brake. Emergency release, I should say. And I took it out, replaced it. This is the old one. Here's the new one. So I've taken it out and I've replaced it, and you just push them back together. This amount of force, it goes click. Oh, you see, that was it, trying to take the thingy off. Right. Trying to see if I can demonstrate this properly. There we are, you see? Yeah. So, and in fact, if you look carefully, I'm not sure you can see, but there's a couple of these tiny little arms here. They hook onto a spring-loaded release mechanism for this kind of, I wouldn't say it's a cam, it's a sort of hook that hooks into this little thing here. So this is how it looked when we opened it. Put the new component in. You just pull this out gently with a pair of pliers, that's fine. And then this should push together nicely. It just goes click. And that's it. So that's now ready for use to go back on the car. I have to put it all back together. So the next piece of the puzzle, the final piece of the puzzle, is how do I get... This is the hole where the little release wire for the emergency release brake was. When I took the thing out, I had to squeeze a couple of clips, it passes through the hole, and then you pull it out down the bottom. My problem now is, how do I put it back? Well, the answer, as you can sort of see, is I've got some wire. I pushed the wire down the hole until the wire pops out at the bottom, hopefully here, and here it is. Here's my little piece of wire, and here is the emergency release cable, which I did try and stuff up there, but it didn't really work. I'll pull that out. I'm now going to attach this piece of wire round the end of the release cable and then pull it through the hole and hope that pulls it up. Hopefully that'll work. So as you can see, miraculously that has actually worked. Here's the emergency release loop. Here's my little cable. Managed to put it through. Obviously I don't want to put it too tight because I'll just pull the emergency release brake, which is a bad idea. But now I can undo this and then I'm done.